Hello, I'm Paula Simon speaking to you today from the Edmonton Journal's newsroom studio, and I'm here with my colleague Johnny Wakefield from our crime bureau. In February, you may recall a story that Johnny reported about a young man, a boy of 15, who was allegedly roughed up by transit peace officers at the Belvedere transit station. But I'm here today with Johnny to speak about a follow-up investigation that he began back in February. Johnny, can you tell me, why did you decide to file a Freedom of Information request about use of force by Edmonton transit peace officers?
So I was trying to understand at the time sort of whether transit peace officers using force is out of the ordinary or sort of how common it is. I had asked the city to just publicly give me statistics on how often transit peace officers use force. They declined to do so, so I filed a Freedom of Information request for basically 10 years of statistics on how often these law enforcement officers use force. And I got that back a few weeks ago, and what we saw is that there is a trend, and it's going up. If you look at the trend line, it sort of looks like a W. So when they started out in 2008, there were over 600 uses of force by these officers, and then it dropped pretty dramatically to being in the 200, 300 range. These are uses of force per year. But it started to kind of pick back up recently. It's doubled since 2015 to just over 520 uses of force, 523 to be exact. And that was information that we had to go through FOIP for. When the police, for example, use force, that's publicly reported twice a year, and it's very detailed. It comes through the police commission. You can really see trends in very specific kinds of uses of force, down to, like, did they pepper spray someone? Did they hit them with a baton? Did they hold them, use a dog on them? These are just raw numbers, so it's sort of hard to say what exactly that trend means, but it does seem that transit peace officers are using force more.
And how do they define force? Because this is an interesting question, because you're right, when the police commission puts out its findings, they break down every kind of interaction, and they also break down, did this happen as the result of a traffic stop? Did this happen while they were serving warrants? But the numbers that you got from Edmonton Transit are just raw numbers. So what does use of force mean to an ETS peace officer? Well,
it's pretty similar to police. They don't use the exact same term, but the police standard for what constitutes use of force is anything above cooperative handcuffing, they call it. I think they call it soft, empty hands. So if you have to do anything more forceful than put handcuffs on a person who's cooperating, that counts as a use of force.
And did they offer you any explanation of why there's been this escalation and almost 100% increase over 2 years in use of force by transit peace officers?
Well, it has almost doubled since 2015, as you mentioned. And the officer I talked to, or the manager in security there, had basically said he hadn't looked at the detailed data, but it could be that they're now reporting lower level things that maybe a supervisor saw. Hey, you led someone from point A to point B in handcuffs, you should technically be filing a use of force report, or you did something other low level that you might not think rises to the level, but we should report that.
With the police, they're accountable to the police commission. There's a way of tracking every time there's a use of control, as the police call it. And it concerns me a little bit that when we send peace officers out who have a lot less training than police, and nobody is tracking to see whether the use of force should concern us. Because, obviously there are going to be some times when force is going to be required and necessary. But I guess what concerns me is that nobody seems to have been keeping track of why force is happening and whether it's being used appropriately.
Yeah, the times that we have heard about peace officers using force is usually because someone from a community comes forward and sort of raises an alarm bell in the media about that. Basically, as we talked about, this is not released publicly anywhere. It's sort of hard to say, why are we seeing the trends that we're seeing? Is it just because they're getting better at reporting and they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's, or is there actually a trend here? The most recent one is obviously this young boy who, you can watch the clip of the video that is there. Obviously, it's a limited clip that only shows part of the overall interaction. But is that out of the ordinary? It's kind of hard to say based on the numbers that we were able to get.